What happens when a CEO goes undercover and gets kicked out of his own bank? You're not allowed to sit here. This area is for real clients only. Gwen Halbrook's voice sliced through the quiet, like a blade tearing through heavy fabric, spun from years of silent bias. The clock on the wall read 10:17 a.m. at the VIP lounge of Stonebridge Capital's downtown Miami branch, a space lined with marble and adorned with expensive abstract art. Yet the elegance of the room couldn't mask the contempt in her gaze, aimed squarely at the woman seated in the corner. Alana Pierce, 45 years old, remained still, her hands resting gently on the bag that carried her tablet. She wore dark jeans, a soft grey cashmere sweater, black leather flats with no logo, and on her wrist was a fresh bruise, the result of a minor accident that morning when a man ran a red light and yelled at her, "Don't you know the rules?" Gwen had noticed the bruise, and for a fleeting moment she believed it explained everything: the outfit, the presence, and the place this woman belonged. What Gwen didn't know was that the tablet in Alana's hands contained a full digital copy of the merger agreement between Stonebridge Capital and Orion Enterprises, a company in which Alana held 83% ownership. She wasn't just a VIP client. She was the owner. But this morning, she hadn't come to declare her status. She came to observe, to confirm something she had heard time and again, that there are people who don't care who you are. If you don't look the way they expect, they'll decide you don't belong. And in the long silence that followed Gwen's dismissive command, Alana felt no surprise, only confirmation. Everything was going according to plan, and Gwen had just stepped into the lead role of a test she didn't even know she was taking. Alana didn't respond right away. She simply looked up at Gwen, with eyes shaped by experience, calm in a way that made it clear those prejudiced words no longer had the power to wound. But the truth was, they still cut, not because of their weight, but because of their repetition. 22 years ago, at a small bank on the outskirts of Chicago, a young woman named Pierce had been denied a business account simply because she didn't have an established credit history, despite carrying a detailed 34-page financial plan and proper registration documents. 5 years later, while building Orion Group from a modest brokerage into a real estate empire, Alana had once been labeled high risk when she applied for a $200,000 credit line, even though she put down more than double that amount as collateral. Each rejection strengthened her resolve to never let it happen again. And yet, this morning, inside a bank owned by her very own corporation, the same words echoed, this time from a blonde woman wearing a branch manager badge, like a symbol of authority. In the corner of the room, a young black girl, maybe 7 years old, sat beside her mother, eyes wide as she looked at Gwen, then at Alana. The child tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, as if asking something quietly. That moment pierced Alana, not because she was insulted, but because she knew she had become a living example of a truth that still hadn't changed. Children like that little girl were still growing up in a world where a person's worth was judged by appearance alone. But this time, Alana didn't turn away. She didn't choose silence. She hadn't come here just to observe. She had come to begin. And with every word, every glance from Gwen, her resolve only deepened. This test needed to continue, all the way to the end. As Alana opened her tablet to display confirmation of a $500,000 withdrawal from her personal account, a mocking laugh cut through the air from behind. Connor Bishop, A white man in a tailored grey suit, silk tie, and cologne so strong it seemed to dominate the space, walked past her table. Without even looking, he swung his arm and knocked the tablet to the floor. "Don't clog the line, sweetheart. This place is for people who know how to move real money," he said, smirking as he walked away. The fall cracked the tablet screen along the edge, a shard of glass nicking the fresh bruise on Alana's wrist. A few clients turned to look. One middle-aged man frowned. A young woman shook her head. But no one spoke. At the far end of the lounge, Eric Tran, a young tech entrepreneur, quietly pulled out his phone and started recording. Gwen shot Eric a look of disapproval, then turned to Alana. "We need to know where that money is coming from. You have to prove it." Alana replied calmly, "Run my name." Gwen shook her head with mockery in her tone. "No verification. This isn't a self-service branch." Just then, a voice rose from behind Eric. "She doesn't need to prove anything." Maya Shields, who had been silent until now, stood up, clutching the strap of her purse, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "The problem isn't her, it's all of you." The air snapped tight like a stretched wire. Shannon Reese, another bank employee, crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes, her voice cold as steel. "That amount doesn't match. It could very well be stolen." A whisper, but hard as stone. Alana remained seated, as if she were watching a performance she had already memorized. She slowly turned to Maya and said gently, "Let them hear your voice, not just see your eyes." And in that moment, the room divided in two, those who wanted to stay silent, and those who no longer could. Maya stepped forward, her voice no longer a whisper. "She's not the problem. You are." Gwen narrowed her eyes. "You're causing a disturbance. Security has been called." Across the room, Connor leaned against a pillar and let out a dismissive laugh. "Do you people actually believe she has $500,000 sitting here? For what? To buy a chain of pawn shops?" He bent down and tossed a slip of paper toward Alana. It slid across the marble floor and stopped right at the tip of her shoe. Maya bent down, picked it up, and read it aloud. "Go withdraw your money from a pawn shop." A chill swept through the room. An elderly woman gripped her purse tighter. A young father looked up from his phone, eyes fixed on Alana with concern. Gwen pressed her lips together, clearly satisfied that her authority still held. But then Alana spoke, not with anger, but with a quiet, cold certainty. "Every word you say is eroding the credibility of this institution. Not because I'll post it anywhere, but because I'm the one behind it." Gwen scoffed. "You sound delusional. Power fantasies don't scare me." Alana shook her head slightly, then calmly spoke into her phone. "Celeste, initiate Protocol 6. On the other end, Celeste Ward, Alana's executive assistant, responded without hesitation. "Ready when you are, ma'am." The entire room fell silent, as if someone had flipped a switch and muted the world. All eyes turned to the woman seated there, who hadn't raised her voice or stood up. But a storm had begun, and it wasn't loud. It arrived through data, through discipline, and through a legitimacy no one in that room had seen coming. The call lasted less than 10 seconds, but its impact spread like a jolt of electricity. Gwen narrowed her eyes and slowly stepped closer, as if trying to confirm what she had just heard. "Who did you call?" she asked, her voice dropping but still laced with threat. Alana didn't respond. She placed her phone face down on the walnut table, calm as if she had just ordered a drink at a cafe. Eric, still discreetly recording from below eye level, turned to Terence Cole, a black businessman in a slate-grey suit, sitting quietly across the room. "Should we post this?" Eric whispered. But Terence gently placed a hand on his shoulder and replied, "No. Today we don't film to go viral. Today we speak. To end the silence." Gwen turned to Shannon. "Call security. Now!" Shannon picked up the phone. "We have a suspected imposter attempting an unauthorized withdrawal. We need immediate assistance." She spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Alana didn't flinch. She had once sat before a board of European investors, faced a $300 million contract dispute, and weathered 3 economic downturns. This, by comparison, was merely a local performance. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. "I'm not here to defend my reputation. I'm here to defend a principle." As the call for security echoed through the room, Travis Boone, the assistant branch manager, leaned forward as if he wanted to step in. He glanced at Gwen, then at Alana, then at the customers who had begun to murmur among themselves. Inside Travis was a tightening pull between 2 worlds, a career built under Gwen's shadow, and a truth that was now becoming visible in the eyes of everyone present. Connor spoke up again. "She's just performing. If she really had the money, she would have shown it already. People like that always talk a big game, but never prove a thing." He took a step forward, his chin tilted into challenge. "You want to prove it? Open an account right now, in front of everyone." Travis stepped back. He remembered clearly. A week ago, Alana had submitted a request internally, asking for a review of all unresolved complaints that had been blocked. Gwen had withheld that request. Travis had remained silent when he saw it. But now, with everything playing out in front of him, he could no longer pretend. Eric reached for his phone again, but this time Alana looked him straight in the eyes and gently said, "No need to record. We don't need their eyes. We need their ears." The room seemed to hold its breath. Not a single sound interrupted. And for the first time since the confrontation began, it was the silence itself that became the heaviest piece of evidence. Security arrived. Oscar Miles, the head of security, entered the lobby in a dark navy uniform, his posture radiating authority. "What's going on here?" he asked. Shannon pointed at Alana. Suspicion of unauthorized withdrawal, refusal to cooperate, no verification. Oscar walked straight over, didn't ask any questions, just gestured firmly. "Bag and device." Alana didn't move. Oscar bent down and knocked the leather bag off the chair beside her, letting it drop to the floor. Maya let out a soft gasp. Eric tightened his grip on his phone, but didn't record. Alana raised her head, looking Oscar directly in the eye. "Touch me again, and all of Stonebridge will pay the price." Oscar laughed dismissively. "Is that a threat? I don't care who you are. You don't belong here." Those 5 words, "You don't belong here," rang out like nails being hammered into a board, echoing Gwen's words from earlier that morning. Terence stepped forward. "You're detaining someone who hasn't committed a crime. Based on what?" Oscar didn't answer. He looked at Gwen. Gwen nodded. The unspoken order was clear. But before Oscar could act further, Alana slowly rose to her feet. Not rushed, not frantic, She reached into her tablet case and pulled out a black folder, opened it, and turned it toward those standing nearby. An appointment letter naming her CEO of Orion Enterprises, a certificate of ownership for 83% of Stonebridge Bank, and an emergency authorization directive from the board of directors. I am Alana Pierce, chair of Orion Enterprises, and every word you've spoken has been recorded, both in data and in witness testimony. Silence fell over the room. Connor stepped back. Gwen turned pale. Shannon whispered, "We've been set up." But Alana calmly said, "No, I tested you, and you failed." The air in the waiting lounge grew thick, as if the oxygen had been drained from the room. All eyes turned to Alana, no longer the woman who had been disrespected, but someone now holding the scales of justice in her hands. She didn't need to raise her voice, only turned to Gwen and spoke, her tone clear and firm, as though delivering a verdict. "Gwen Holbrook, you are hereby terminated immediately for racial discrimination, abuse of power, and obstruction of customer service." Gwen opened her mouth to protest, but only a breathless gasp came out. Alana then turned to Travis Boone. "You are terminated for complicity and for staying silent while a customer was publicly humiliated." Travis didn't argue. He bowed his head, as if finally freed from something his conscience had long refused to tolerate. "Shannon Reese," Alana continued, her voice unwavering, "you are terminated for deliberately filing false risk reports, falsely calling the police, and intentionally burying discrimination complaints." Shannon collapsed into her chair, as though her strength had drained away. She stammered, "I didn't know. I didn't know it was you." Alana looked at her directly. "And if it was someone else, would you still have done it?" Shannon said nothing, because she knew the answer was yes. "Oscar Miles," she went on, "you are terminated for unlawful detainment and for using force to intimidate a customer." Oscar didn't reply, only walked slowly toward the far end of the lobby, as if waiting for the last bus out of a sinking place. "And finally," she turned to Connor, "you are permanently banned from all Stonebridge branches for harassment, discrimination, and a repeated history of violations in investment dealings." Connor shot to his feet and shouted, "You can't do this! Oh, I'm a VIP customer. But his voice faded beneath the growing sound of scattered applause from nearby customers, not polite claps, but the kind that carried the weight of long-suppressed fury. Alana stepped into the center of the lobby, now no longer a reception area, but a courtroom. She didn't need a microphone. Each of her words rang out with unmistakable clarity. "Effective immediately, all operations at this branch will be suspended until we rebuild our core values." Not a single customer objected. Some nodded, a few held hands, and one person even whispered, "Finally." She raised her tablet and switched to speaker, letting Celeste Ward's voice echo through the room. "I've submitted an emergency report to the Internal Ethics Division. All buried complaints have been restored. The list of disciplined employees is being updated." Alana continued, "We're not just auditing data. We're auditing words. Every phrase, every glance, every time someone was made to feel like a burden just for walking through these doors." A young customer raised a hand. "What can we do to help?" Alana smiled for the first time that morning. By no longer staying silent, she announced the rollout of the Summit Equity Program, built on 3 pillars: a full review of internal language, mandatory retraining for all staff, and a requirement that every employee sign a values pledge directly with the executive board, with no intermediaries. A fresh energy began to ripple through the room. No one saw Alana as someone withdrawing money anymore. They saw her as someone who had just planted a new flag on old ground, not to claim it, but to begin again, for everyone. Just as the tension in the room began to settle, Oscar suddenly stepped forward, his voice rough and raw. "I have something to say." All eyes turned toward him. "I didn't just fail to stop what happened here today. I helped plan it." A ripple of shock spread through the room. Oscar continued. 2 months ago, Shannon came to me. She said headquarters was auditing ethics metrics. Gwen told me to make sure every problematic customer disappeared before they could file a complaint. We flagged customers of color as internal risks, and if they asked too many questions, I was instructed to either ask them to leave or threaten to call the police. Chloe Davis, one of the black customers standing nearby, stood frozen. "That's racial discrimination," she said, her voice trembling. Oscar nodded. "I know. I knew. And I still did it." Celeste appeared on the screen, her voice firm. "I've located 3 reports that were altered after complaints were submitted." Oscar's name appears on all 3. Oscar didn't protest. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to take responsibility. And I want to say one more thing. Shannon didn't act alone. There's a list of customers flagged with internal risk codes, and that list is longer than anyone thinks." Alana stood in silence for a long moment, then turned to the customers and said softly, "That's why reform doesn't start in seminars, not in PowerPoint decks, but right here, in the very place that once kept silent." And the room, once stifled by old rules, finally began to breathe again, through the truth. As Oscar stepped away from the center of the lobby, with the room still suspended in silence, a trembling voice rose from the back. "Wait. I have something to say." Every eye turned toward Shannon Reese. Her face was pale, her once perfectly styled hair now disheveled. She stood there, hands clenched tightly together, as if holding on to the last fragment of dignity that was slipping away. "I buried 8 complaints this year," she said, her voice soft but unmistakable. "All from women of color. I flagged them as duplicates, unverifiable, or past the resolution window. I did it to keep the clean metrics Gwen demanded." She paused, then looked at Travis. "You knew. You told me to do whatever it took." A faint hiss rose from the crowd. Travis didn't look back. Celeste's voice came through the speaker. "Confirmed. Shannon's voice appears in 2 audio clips, rejecting complaint submissions. Travis's signature appears on 4 reports." Shannon collapsed into a chair, hands covering her face. "I didn't know how to stop," she sobbed. "I thought if I didn't comply, I'd be the next one pushed out." Alana stepped forward, her gaze neither cold nor sympathetic. "You are not a victim. You didn't just follow. You carried the torch that burned the system from within." Shannon didn't argue. Her tears fell silently into her hands. Tears that could no longer undo anything, but could not be ignored either. In that moment, the room did not just witness a confession. It witnessed the exposure of a disease embedded deep within the processes, the structure, the very policies written to protect but wielded to exclude. No justification was offered. No one intervened, because everyone knew this was no longer about individuals. It was a reckoning for a system that had survived by choking the smallest voices. And in that instant, just before Alana turned back to face the room to deliver her final declaration, everyone understood. A confession like this was not an ending. It was the beginning of having nothing left to hide. "We can't rebuild a system if silence is allowed to prevail," Alana said, stepping once more to the center of the room. The customers who remained weren't standing out of curiosity. They stood because they had chosen to stand on the side of what's right. Internal compliance officers were now present. One of them handed Alana a folder labeled Emergency Action Plan. She nodded, scanned through it quickly, and announced, "Starting today, all branches serving high, net worth clients will be required to conduct regular language audits. There will be no more places to hide bias behind words." Celeste followed. Connor Bishop's accounts have been frozen, and his investment firm is under investigation for internal discrimination practices. From the back row, an elderly man stood up, Raymond Blake, and slowly made his way forward. "I was the one who trained Gwen, Shannon, and Travis, and I must admit, I helped plant the seeds of this culture with terms like client quality, appropriate demeanor, words that never mentioned race but always aimed at skin color." Alana approached him gently and asked, "Why speak up now?" Raymond's voice caught. "Because today I saw you take it down, with nothing but your voice." He turned to the compliance team. "I want to help rebuild the training program." Celeste confirmed. 17 clients were flagged as high risk. 15 were people of color or of Latin origin. None had a history of misconduct. Alana closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Then let's make it official. This isn't a single incident. It's a culture." Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't just fight it. You broke it." Alana gave a faint smile. "Now we have to rebuild." And as she walked into the conference room with the compliance team, there was no applause, no cheers. But everyone knew, today a bank had changed, not because of a policy, but because one person refused to stay silent. And that is how a new system begins, not with a slogan, but with the truth. Lasting change does not begin with grand speeches, but with how we respond to the smallest things, a suspicious glance, a biased remark, or a complicit silence. When Alana Pierce walked into her own bank and was treated like a criminal simply because of how she dressed, she didn't respond with anger or a camera. She chose truth. She chose words. And that calm resolve brought down an entire system once thought untouchable. As someone who has advised on organizational restructuring, I believe this. Every culture begins with attitude, and attitude is a personal choice repeated daily. If you believe in an environment where every person is treated fairly not because they look the part, but because they are human, then like and subscribe so you won't miss stories like this. And leave a comment with the phrase, "Choose fairness," because fairness is not automatic. It is something we must actively choose.